Oh, you guys are... See, it's really pity. I don't speak any Cantonese. In Chinese, I say, 你们很乖. Very good. But see, I used to teach kindergarten, as many of you know, as I repeatedly say. But somehow, teaching kindergarten, holding meetings in D.C., lots of similarities. Not as much singing, but the naughty factor quite high. But I want to thank all of you because you did do something that's very un-DC-like and actually arrive on time. I don't know if you know this. But I've trained people. People that come to the China Environment Forum meetings know that I am kind of crazy that way. And when I co-sponsor meetings with other programs, those people always come about 20 minutes late. But you guys, keeping with the system here. My name is, for those of you that don't know, I always have to introduce myself, and Helen always laughs. She's going to say the same thing again. I'm Jennifer Turner. I've been directing the China Environment Forum. We are approaching 10 years that I've been at the Woodrow Wilson Center. Oh, nolly. The China Environment Forum has been around for about 12 years, focusing on energy and environmental issues and sometimes food safety, most recently in China. And I think that we are one of the main shops in town that also, we pay attention to Hong Kong. Because I actually think Hong Kong is a rather important place, particularly when you think about southern China being the engine for growth for China. And my goal, personal passion, is thinking that I want it to be the engine of green. And Hong Kong is key in that, and that's why I was very excited that the Secretary agreed to come today. I mean, we've had some other Hong Kong researchers and NGOs coming through over the years. Of course, Christine Loh has been here, a partner working with the Hong Kong government and with Guangdong, just being a facilitator, and also Hong Kong University folks. So it's been very exciting over the years to focus on, not that many people focus on Hong Kong's green side. So that's why I'm really glad that we can have Edward here today. I'm being very cash. I should say Secretary Yao. Sorry. But you do have the bio, but of course you should note that Edward Yao was appointed Secretary for the Environment in July 1st of 2007. And he's got a big portfolio. And maybe we will at one point maybe want you to talk about that, because there's been rearranging in the Hong Kong government that the Environmental Protection Department has a bigger mandate. Possibly even, thinking more holistically and bringing other departments together, which must be a management nightmare, but not for Hong Kong. Right? You guys can do this. But he oversees environmental protection, conservation, energy, and sustainable development, and working on both the policy and the planning side. And in prior, he's been working in the Hong Kong government since 1981, various positions, and you even were in D.C. for a time. When was that?
Between 01 and 04.
01 and 04. Okay, so he...
Eddie's job. So.
Oh, and Eddie's job. Eddie's like, bye. And somebody said, I kind of want his life. He's kind of done really cool things, moved around different agencies in Hong Kong, and went to Hong Kong University and, what was it? It was Oxford University. So I'm going to stop talking because you really came here to hear him. And as I noted at the beginning, it's going to be talking about Hong Kong's work to help green the Pearl River Delta. And also, I think I can say this, in the Q&A, you can ask this man hard questions, right? Right? And if you don't, I will. All right? So, can we just say applause to greet the Secretary?
Thank you, Jennifer. I think the beauty of having someone who visit Hong Kong, even for one time, make a whole lot of difference. Well, actually, for my presentation, Jennifer has in fact sort of summarized it in one sentence. So thank you for allowing me this opportunity of addressing this audience. And in fact, I have a parallel agenda that I've long been hoping to come back after my 3 years very fond memory of Washington here. But 5 years has lapsed. So I finally got an opportunity of coming back. I'm particularly happy to come back here to address an audience who has very passionate about a subject which Hong Kong is also sort of holding very close to our heart, which is the green agenda. Now, nowadays, every government seems to be using this buzzword, green economy or green agenda. But in my last 2 years, I think Hong Kong has in fact walked a very green pathway in the sense that this agenda has been in our government policy portfolio slightly before the economic tsunami hit all of us. So we are not talking about green economy simply for the sake of a quick fix on our economy, but actually this is something very close to our heart. The reason is simple. I think Hong Kong is a very affluent society. People do have high expectation on our environment. Our people travel around the world comparing our sky with those here in Washington, Tokyo, New York. So one of the complaints when I got into office 2 years ago is why there are fewer sort of blue sky days these days. Major complaint on air. And looking back the past 5 years, air pollution, climate, environment has been the second most important subject in the heart of people. The first one always changed. When I did education portfolio, somehow it was education because that was the time that we're having the reform. And then it moved on to constitutional development, representative government, and recently to economy. But what remains in the second utmost important thing is always air, clean environment, and now green economy. So I think that explains why we have restructured ourselves in the third-term government of the SAR, the Special Administrative Region. I have been given a much bigger portfolio than my predecessor in that, in addition to the traditional environmental protection policy, I have energy put under my portfolio, which to me is difficult but is rewarding in the sense that nowadays you can't separate energy from an environment because basically it leaves too big a footprint to be untackled if we are not having a policy of energy sort of working hand in hand with environmental protection. And in addition, we have sustainability policy under my portfolio as well, which is logical. But not many people recognize that, well, as the Secretary for Environment in Hong Kong, I also look after our country parks, which is the equivalent of your national park, because nature conservation is also one of the 4 pillars in my portfolio. And actually, I studied geography some 20-odd years ago, and my last stop before I depart DC was to visit the Yellowstone Park. And I don't know whether there's any association. Now we have put an agenda of putting the first geological park in Hong Kong. We're aiming to seek National Geological Park status, and thereafter we'll be seeking UNESCO recognition of World Geological Park, because we do have some geological features there. Now, all these come to, as Jennifer mentioned, a holistic approach. The problem we are facing is in Hong Kong, we do expect a green environment. And by certain standard, we are itself a green city. I will cover a few points. But green is good, but green is not good enough these days. That there's every effort for government to go greener. But the ultimate goal for Hong Kong to be a green city, to strive to be a greener community, rests with the possibility of whether we can make Hong Kong, together with the Pearl River Delta, our neighborhood, the greenest part of the nation. If we succeed, then I think we all will be sharing the joy and the benefit and the externality arising from this movement. And I think we will all contribute to the world effort of tackling climate change. Now, when I say green, when I say Hong Kong is a green city, I think most of the people who visit Hong Kong briefly may not necessarily feel it. Because this picture, people would not associate with Hong Kong, but this is one of the 234 islands in Hong Kong which maintain this way. Very much part of nature. Among the 234 islands, 2 are more popular. One, of course, the Hong Kong Island on one side of the Victoria. Oh, sorry.
Well, you can move around.
Okay, I'll try to move around. Actually, other than Hong Kong Island, it was the Lantau Island where the new airport is located. But overall speaking, over 40% of our land are still very much preserved as natural reserve. When I say natural, it's not like Central Park of New York, nor Regent Park, Hyde Park of London, or the Royal Park of Tokyo. We are talking about almost half of Hong Kong's land being preserved as natural environment. They have been in that way for millions of years. And our biodiversity is on the increase instead of dropping. We have 500 species of migrant birds, 200 species of butterfly, 120 species of dragonflies found there. But that's not the purpose of my description of green city. These days, I think we do look at our carbon footprints. Now, I mentioned about 40% of land protected under the country park. 90% of our commuting are done through public transport. So I think that compares favorably with any city in the same league. And carbon footprint, 6.7 tons. How does that compare with the US? I think you are 24. Australia 26, UK 12, Japan 12, Singapore 9. So while our GDP, per capita GDP, is roughly about 2/3 of yours, our carbon footprint is just around 1/4. So when people say that in a very highly developed community or economy like Hong Kong, we can actually live with a smaller carbon footprint. But obviously, when this compared with what scientists advocate in fighting against climate change, the whole world would be much happier if we all stay within 2 tons. That's the global target. Okay, so and in terms of a big city metropolitan waste generated, we managed to gradually pick up the recycling up to 48% last year. Still a bit undesirable, but that's the carbon footprint picture. Yes, people would not settle for all that. I'm the one who received huge amount of complaint day in, day out, not necessarily by green groups, but also by every citizen on the street, saying that, well, we could do more. We could make the city greener by urban greening, by reducing our electricity consumption, by shifting to cleaner transport. So, in the last 2 years, I think we have been working on a green agenda which we hope to make the city a happier place for living. Two ways to do it.
Cell phone in your pocket, or is that your BlackBerry in your pocket?
No.
Nothing electronic.
No. I think it's the
Okay,
microphone
good.
over
All
there.
right.
Yep. We do it by generally 2 ways. One is going clean, the other is going green. By going clean means that, well, we can shift to a greener energy generation. Because in Hong Kong, 63% of our carbon emission actually come from our own energy generation, i.e. the electricity generation. Currently, we are still using a bit filthy sort of fuel because about 50% of our electricity are generated by by coal combustion. About 28% natural gas. The remaining is nuclear. It's a nuclear plant that we invest across the boundary and then supply back to us. That combination, that fuel mix, is not sustainable. It's not clean. So we are making plans to sort of reverse the picture by at least having 50% using natural gas. And we have just signed an agreement with the mainland for the continuation of at least 20% nuclear from the north, and with the possibility of expanding more. But obviously, we can do better, particularly in the area of renewable energy. I mentioned about having the energy portfolio add to my bureau. That allowed me that in 2 years ago, when we sort of renewed the scheme of control, the contractual agreement with the 2 companies, I managed to put in a carrot and stick program in our sort of agreement with the power company, whereby renewable energy can enjoy a higher permitted return, which is 11% versus 9.9% for normal sort of generation. There are also sort of a bonus for outperforming our very stringent sort of emission cap, but there will also be penalty should any pollutant exceed our standard. So there is a commitment to move to cleaner energy. In terms of cleaner air, we also sort of starting to review our air quality objective, which is the planning guidelines for all future development. These set of air quality guidelines will be part of the statutory provision governing our future development. The current one has been dated because it was out for almost 20 years. In the recent review we conduct, we try to benchmark as much as possible to the WHO guideline issued 2 years ago. The recent recommendation made by the study group is likely to result in a recommendation whereby among the 7 pollutants, we should be able to benchmark around half of them to the ultimate WHO guidelines. And the remaining half may take stages, take interim targets. Now, if that's eventually come into our guidelines, that will make Hong Kong's air quality objective quite comparable to those of the EU, and in certain area, we will surpass US, like on NOx. Okay? So that's where we are heading towards. Cleaner production. Many people realize that, well, Hong Kong is no longer a place for manufacturing production because they all move north and partly also contribute to the air pollution coming back to Hong Kong. So while if we just look at things within the city, then, well, it's none of our business. There's things across the boundary. But no, because a substantial amount of these production lines are in fact invested by Hong Kong. So that's why it was proposed in 2007, the first year in my term, and then implemented last April in 2008, that we're actually spending money across the boundary to help Hong Kong investor in the Pearl River Delta to shift to cleaner production. That's the 12 million project that I mentioned. It resembles quite a bit like P2E2 that the US government has been advocating in Asia. The only difference is after 1 year, we have 160 firms joining. I'm still searching for a double-digit number from the P2E2 scheme. The basic difference is we're not just stimulating such cleaner production by a loan. We use dollar-for-dollar matching to encourage firms to do audit and then subsequent improvement. One requirement for getting these subsidies, they need to demonstrate similar technology to their counterparts in the same industry. So this momentum, 160 in the first year, despite the economic sort of challenges, these projects are on the roll. And we also managed to have 5 major banks in Hong Kong doing green financing for this project. So that's the major project by saying we try to go clean. Now, going green, if we look within Hong Kong, the biggest challenge for a reduced carbon footprint actually lies in the skyline of Hong Kong. We all know that Hong Kong is a metropolitan city where people live typically at the 40th floor instead of on the ground floor. There are over 40,000 buildings in Hong Kong. And actually, they consume 89% of the total electricity that we produce. Lighting, aircon, elevators, common facilities. So if we can manage to reduce the energy we use or use it wisely, environmental friendlier, we stand a chance of reducing our carbon emission. So as a result, the government has rolled out last month, or earlier, still April, right? 8th of this month, a scheme where, again, on a dollar-for-dollar basis, encourage building owners, including residential, commercial, industrial, to do energy efficiency improvements. It covers 2 parts. One is the carbon com energy audit. The other part is the efficiency enhancement program. The dollar-for-dollar matching, again, is to try to give the maximum incentive for people to make the change. Often the challenge is not the unawareness, it's the lack of momentum. So we hope that, well, this will make the change. And in the process, we also trained up 500 carbon auditors coming from the engineering sector, coming from the property management company, coming from the equipment supplier, who are the change agent, because there would be self-interest for them, say, property managers, if they manage to sort of engage the owners in shifting to more efficient electrical appliances. They can help people to save electricity bill, save the management fee, or secure their contract. So that's the way we are doing. In addition, government on our own are also spending equal amount of money in modernizing and upgrading our own buildings. So as a result, altogether, we are talking about coming close to $200 million to be spent, or business opportunity to be created in the coming 3 to 5 years on building energy efficiency alone. We're also working on legislation to provide the minimum standards. We will be building greener, more sustainable waste management facility. One major complaint that we have on ourselves is we have taken down our incinerator too early and didn't have the commitment or the political muscle to put back the modern one. We are still fighting a battle whereby how to put back a more modern sort of waste management scheme. While there are measures to reduce waste, to recycle waste, we somehow need to also tackle waste management. Currently, 99% of refuse are still dumped in landfills, and no one would believe that would make a sensible solution in a tiny place in Hong Kong for precious lands to be used for landfill, although we manage our landfill very, very well. But you would say that, well, you can't just focus on management without reducing waste. And I managed with some, I would call it some small steps of success last week before I came over to this trip. We have the plastic shopping bag levy enacted and will be introduced on 7th of July after 2 years struggling with our legislature. Coming back to DC, I won't need to tell the difficulties in working with your Congress equivalent. Legislation are all controversial, however well-intended they are. But I managed, in the first year, have the principal legislation of polluters pay enacted in the Product Responsibility Bill. And then this year, despite some controversy, but strong public support, we managed to have that levy. And hopefully that will reduce a substantial amount of plastic shopping bag as an initial step for more control over other forms of municipal solid waste. While Hong Kong can go greener, but look at the sky, if we cannot have a greener neighborhood, we will be still struggling on a point without seeing any prospect in our vast hinterland. So I think the ultimate goal is, in fact, to build a greener or the greenest region of the mainland, leveraging on the progress we have made in Hong Kong. In fact, this picture captured the meeting of the two leaders. On the right-hand side, the new party secretary of Guangdong, Wang Yang, he came to office I think in last April. And in the first meeting with our chief executive in last May, one agenda that we successfully presented and given a full support and consensus was to develop Guangdong, Pearl River Delta, and Hong Kong, together with Macau, into what we call a green PRD quality living area. Now, this marks a very important milestone in our collaboration. We have, over the years, have had a lot of environmental cooperation, largely on remedial measures. For instance, joint cooperation in cleaning up the air. Both sides pledged to reduce the pollutants by a certain percent. Together, we built an air monitoring system with a view to reducing pollution emission. Together, we work on the water quality. But largely, those are on sectorial remedial measures. The new agenda to build a green PRD quality living area is more on a forward-looking and highlighting on the concept of sustainability. There is a strong belief that, well, for Guangdong, particularly taking the advantage of 30 years of open door policy within the mainland, we are the first region to open up and benefit from the economic development. But likewise, we are also suffering. We're also suffering from the cost on the environmental side that we are paying for economic prosperity. So now that, well, the region surpassed other areas in terms of economic performance, we should sort of look at the long-term sustainable future. And that's why the agreement to sort of develop this concept. So actually, this concept is not just a bilateral arrangement between Hong Kong and Guangdong. It has recently been endorsed by the central government through an outline development paper issued by Beijing's National Development and Reform Commission. So it's becoming part of the national policy that this region will strive to do greener. And we hope to put that into the 12th five-year plan for mainland to be issued next year. How does it translate into sort of quantitative terms? I hate to use dollar sign to quantify environment, but that might be one of the indicators you can see the scale of things. In terms of infrastructural development within Hong Kong, we are talking about the equivalent of nearly 4 billion that the government will be devoted to this list of facilities, largely to cater for waste management, harbor treatment, and worth mentioning is the district cooling system. For people who visit Hong Kong 10 years ago, your first experience of Hong Kong is landing in Kai Tak Airport. Now with the new airport sort of coming up, you miss that sort of fun in sort of a maneuvering through rooftops. You can only have that in Disneyland. The old airport is now becoming a new development area because of the proximity to the waterfront. We're building a cruise terminal and also residential, commercial, together with some sort of sporting and recreation facility. For that entire area, we'll be putting a district cooling system there, saving individual buildings from having their own sort of AC plants, which on the one hand would substantially reduce the electricity consumption and therefore saving to the individual owners. And also relieving precious rooftop. Instead of having air conditioning plants there, you can do green roofing, you can put other things on top. And it will make the entire area more sort of so-called carbon friendlier because, well, the total carbon footprint would be reduced. So that's some kind of infrastructure we are testing out in this new area. If that's successful, we'll repeat that, for instance, in the Western Kowloon cultural area. So these are projects that, well, some of which we are very excited to try out. To sum up, in order to sustain the green movement, in the case of Hong Kong together with the mainland, I would say cleaner production, which is the cross-boundary thing, cleaner transport, which is to sustain Hong Kong's sort of a high percentage of public transport and move to a greener mode of transport, and also building energy efficiency are obvious candidates for us to pursue this agenda. And worth mentioning EV that in this particular trip, I had signed agreement with both Mitsubishi and Nissan for them to have the new EV to be tested in Hong Kong, one of which will be in Hong Kong week after next. Hong Kong will be among the first cities in Asia or in the world to test out the Mitsubishi's new EV. Nissan will come. And day before yesterday, when I was in Toronto, I was in another sort of EV company called Zen, zero emission, no noise. They are partnering with, I think, eStore, which is a company in Texas doing battery, and it seems there will be certain breakthrough in their battery technology. Now we will be pursuing this, offering ourselves as one of the possible market for EV, for simple reason, tiny Hong Kong, if there is a form of transport which will have zero emission, why not give it a try? But, and in particular, Hong Kong commuting usually sort of cover slower mileage. And our electricity charges are relatively low, whereas our petrol prices are almost 3 times compared with yours. So it makes a very strong economic case for EV. And if this new wave is to come, then why not capture it? Okay? So on the mainland side, we were talking about $27 billion specifically designated for energy efficiency, emission reduction, and ecological conservation under the what they call the revitalization package. So these are money will be dedicated towards that area. And also worth mentioning is people in the environmental business would all know about the CDM, the Clean Development Mechanism, which are kind of which support the kind of carbon trading. Currently, throughout the world, around 1/3 of CDM projects are actually in the mainland. We have, since last month, sought agreement from the mainland that for Chinese enterprises qualified to do CDM in the mainland, they will include Hong Kong companies. Now, for people who know about Hong Kong, under the closer economic partnership arrangement, Hong Kong company usually meant to be nationality blind in a way that, well, people can come to Hong Kong to establish company and partner with locals to do business in China. We're basically sort of expanding that scope, opening that door to allow international firms to take full advantage of Hong Kong's unique position as a gateway into China. So CDM might be a project. Now, this is also essential for mainland because, well, if we were to help mainland to join the global campaign in reducing the impact of climate change, then the transfer of technology investment are vital, and CDM is the mechanism for it, and Hong Kong can do a part. So that's why in the last sentence I said a store opening arrangement to be put in place. So perhaps I should pause here, and most happy to take questions that you might have. I may not be able to cover everything in this presentation, but I'm happy to answer a question that you raised. Thank you.
Okay. Give a little applause here for a good talk. And can you do the help with the microphone in the back for questions? Because we are being webcast, forgot to tell you before, there's a little sign on the door that says you may be webcast. Can you grab the mic there for me? And so that's why when you ask a question, if you could just use the microphone so those kind souls in Webland can hear you. We archive this as well, so you could put it on your website.
Oh, really? Oh.
Later on, that link. Okay, if you have a question, raise your hand. And Peter, the gentleman right there first.
Hi, my name is Dan Yi, and I want to ask about public transportation in Hong Kong. Now, Hong Kong is known for having lots of cars,
Yep.
and I want to know whether there are initiatives to boost, buses, trains in Hong Kong in the next decade.
Currently, 90% of our commuting are already done through public transport. I think we are one of the very few cities can achieve that level of public transport commuting in more developed economy. People who come to Hong Kong would know that, well, no point driving into the city center because we can either take the MTR or the connecting maxi cabs. Taxis are commonly available. I think the challenge for us is not to reduce further the private transport, which is already sort of very small. The challenge is how to make the transport greener. At present, we have about 35% of commuting done through public railway system, which is like largely a metro system. We have a far more elaborate system than the one here in DC. There will continue to be well-based public transport development. We have actually, in the last 2 years, adding new metro lines. The challenge is how to turn, for instance, buses or minibuses into greener engines. We have done with some great success in the last 10 years or so by having the entire taxi fleet shifting from diesel to LPG. So 99% of our taxis are on LPG, which is a cleaner fuel. About half of the maxi cabs are on LPG too. Buses are a bit challenging because the fleet is very, very big and fare is a local politics. But having said that, we are working to see if we can have some early retirement of old buses. We have also set aside, well, this was done before me, my predecessor has set aside $3.2 billion Hong Kong dollar for Hong Kong commercial vehicles owners to change to a new fleet. But given the circumstances, a lot of small operators, they all wait to the last moment. So that amount of money being set aside will lapse by next March. Currently, the pickup rate is not very high, but I would expect a picking up at the very, very last moment. People tend to wait until the very last moment, particularly in the economic downturn. But that's all we have been doing, and I think that they're more or less the maximum we have been doing, unless we turn to more draconian measures like taking out a big stick saying that, well, if you don't renew your car, we'll have your license taken away. But I think there will be great reluctance for so doing. That's why new technology, for instance, EV that I'm talking, might be a greener option. We pick EV, electric vehicles, because the topography, the geography of Hong Kong being a tiny place, the average commuting per day is less than 30 km. And even our post office vehicles running between 80 to 100 km per day. The new generation of EV coming on stream, they're talking about a fully charged battery able to run between 100 and 160. If the American company that I came across 2 days ago managed to roll out the new battery, they're talking about 400 km. Now, these are yet to be tested, but at least 2 Japanese car manufacturers are rolling out commercially produced vehicles which can run 100 to 160 km. The recurrent costs for running EVs are far cheaper than petrol, particularly in Hong Kong setting. Our electricity charges per unit might be 30% lower than that of US, whereas our petrol prices are 3 times higher. So it works out that, well, keeping a EV running on the road is far more economic option in addition to the environmental benefits. So that's why we're trying to sort of avail ourselves as a market for these technology to be tested out. Now, at the same time, mainland is also doing the same. Mainland cities are also having most of the commuting done through public transport, but their car number is increasing dramatically, both because starting from a low base and also the economic prosperity. To be honest, I don't think traditional petrol-driven engines is the answer. On the contrary, emission-free EV might be a far better option. So that's why we are seeing mainland now identify 13 major cities for their local government to subsidize environmental friendlier cars, including EVs. And last year, when Beijing had the Olympics, they have a fleet of electrical buses running on the road. So we are seeing all these changes in the transportation sector. And Hong Kong, in fact, is a classic example to demonstrate that in a big city, commuting need not be confined to a high proportion of individual vehicles. And basically, we have done all we can in terms of measures that we mentioned. I missed one, also the fuel standard. Hong Kong has adopted Euro 5 diesel since December 2007. Hong Kong is, in fact, one of the 2 places in Asia adopting that higher standard. Basically, it's diesel without any sulfur. Hong Kong, Japan. So we have achieved that since December 2007. So basically, in the transportation sector, we are trying everything out without triggering too much controversy in terms of fare. But eventually, we might need to come to that for greener engine, people might have a need to pay slightly more. So I'll have battle to be fought. But in general, the direction has been very, very clear.
Okay. Lyndon, I had Ma Tianjie. We're going to go. Keep your hands up so Lyndon can see. 1, 2, and Doug is 3, and then Matt's is 4. Well, and then we'll do the next one. We can only count to 4 in the China Environment Forum. It's the end of the day. And make sure you say your name. And
thank you. My name is Ma Tianjie from American University. I have 2 questions. First, could you specify more on the water quality side of your cooperation between Guangdong? Because it seems to me that it's not as high on the agenda as air pollution. Mm-hmm. And also, you mentioned about benchmarking Hong Kong's air quality standard on the WHO guideline. But if most of your pollutants are coming from Guangdong, is there any agenda, is there any initiative to actually harmonize Hong Kong's standard with the Guangdong standard?
Okay. Water quality, yes, is important. It's important in the sense it's not, again, not just a Hong Kong issue. Water quality in 2 senses. One is a supply of drinking water, which we are counting on the mainland to supply about half of our drinking water, basically through the Pearl River Delta. And that's why we, under the Guangdong-Hong Kong cooperation arrangement, we have been working very closely with mainland. And recently we have completed, for instance, one water quality model using various technology to build a mathematical model covering the entire sort of Pearl River system, so as to build a tool for us to more easily identify sources of pollutants, the extent of pollution onto the water, including time taken for a pollution at a certain point reaching downstream. We're also seeing in the mainland there are more money put into sewage treatment, particularly in more upstream, smaller towns. I recently visited one in North Guangdong, which is a more remote area. In the past, people focus on downstream, but actually, if you are not managing the upstream, things will come down. There are also some NGO working to a scheme where they will pool money to raise money from downstream city to help do sort of cleaner water upstream. So these are things working, but they might not have enjoyed such a high profile as air quality, which is more obvious. Moving to air, yes, we set ourselves a very high order, WHO standard, which are very, very hard to fulfill. Even I don't think the US nor European country has fully sort of complied with WHO standard. But we are looking ahead. We are not just looking at problem today. We must look ahead in the next 20, 30 years. So in the current review, we try to benchmark the highest possible. Over the last 10 years or so, we have achieved some substantial improvement in working with Guangdong. Back in 2002, we have a bilateral agreement with Guangdong whereby we both pledged to reduce the 4 pollutants by a range of percentage between 20 to 55. I think SO2, NOx will be reduced by 20%, and then VOC and particularly reduced by 55%. The target is to achieve this percentage reduction by next year, 2010, using 1997 as a base year. On the Hong Kong side, among the 4 pollutants, 3 has come down, except SO2, largely because of problem of our own, because 89% of SO2 comes from our own power company. I mentioned about the new scheme of control that I managed to sort of tighten that gap. And the 08 figures will be released soon. I hope that will mark a downturn, because 05, 06, 07, we are still talking about plus 12%, plus 6%, plus 3%. I'm expecting 08, particularly the year that we tighten the pollution, will have SO2 come down. And then by 2010, at least come down by 20%. On the Hong Kong side, I think that's achievable. On the Guangdong side, things are far more complicated. But at the same time, I think the effort they put in is far more substantial than we have thought. Because for the entire Guangdong area, they are not just dealing with power plants. They have to deal with multiple sources, from manufacturing to metropolitan development, from transport to sort of daily living. In the past couple of years, I think the biggest achievement is they have done a lot in the desulfurization of power plants, as well as shutting down small-scale power plants, and also highly polluting industry like steel making, cement making. So those are sort of tangible and substantial improvement. The challenge is sometimes the backyard illegal sort of power generation against the backdrop of inadequate electricity supply. But I think the challenge for Guangdong is the multiple source. For instance, metropolitan development, the increase in number of cars, the increased use of electricity in high-rise buildings. So I won't envy the job of my counterparts there. But by and large, I think they pledged and they have confidence in coming very close to the target that we commonly set. Next challenge is how to go beyond that. That's something that we are working on.
And didn't Guangdong just a couple of weeks ago, aren't they the first Chinese city they're going to monitor and announce the VOC?
Well, actually, I didn't pick that.
It was just like maybe last week there was notes that they were going to start.
But actually, if you go to website today, you can see some real-time air quality indicators, which are jointly established between Hong Kong and Guangdong under the 202 arrangement. We have together built up air monitoring system. And before I came over here, we also released the 208 figure for the entire Guangdong and Hong Kong air quality area. And for SO2 and PM10, if I remember correctly, the total emission or the pollutants found in the air for 08 for that two particular pollutants have come down by 19 and 11% respectively, which is a major sort of about turn in recent years. Somebody attributed that to closing down a factory, but I cannot deny the fact that, in fact, the Guangdong provincial government has done tremendously well in managing the desulfurization. Some of the desulfurization facility are even gone ahead in terms of timetable compared with ours.
Maybe I'm going to be like the obnoxious chair. I want to interject one question that relates to this. You talked about the program where Hong Kong is, for the first time investing money to do cleaner production in Hong Kong, with the Hong Kong Productivity Council, I believe, leading that. Can you give an example of one factory that what has been the cleaner technology? I mean, are there successes yet? I mean, it's a relatively new program, but just briefly, maybe one example, and then we got all those curious people out here.
The one I visited, there was a pilot scheme, a printing factory, very big scale, top 5 in the mainland. What they done is largely reduce VOC. They also reuse the heat generated from printing for heating up the water system for the hostel for the staff, and also managed to use a central supply of paint to printing, saving the wastage, as well as 500,000 cans which contain all the paints on a yearly basis. Now, most remarkable thing is that factory is very modern. We're not talking about sort of backyard, small one. The factory manager told me that, well, the reason they joined is, well, they are the master of that production within that industry. He said, well, I'm very good in the printing technology, but I know nothing about environment. They actually, initially, they spent some money when they set up the production line, but didn't achieve that effect. With the coming in of the Hong Kong Productivity Center and this scheme, they managed to re-engineer certain parts and achieving sort of reduction in electricity bills, remodeling some of the production process, capping or reducing VOC. So, and there was another example which I haven't seen personally, but it was an awardee of an environmental award. A paper company in one single year achieved a reduction of 80% of electricity consumption. They got the award, but the bigger award is in fact the day in, day out saving of electricity. So energy efficiency, wastage management are now sort of a common feature, and in fact that's what drives the cleaner production campaign.
Okay, we'll keep going down. Lyndon, there's a woman on this side. There was one person on this side.
Your question was already answered.
Okay, already answered. All right, good.
Doug Spellman, I'm here at the Woodrow Wilson Center. My question also has been partially answered, but I thought maybe more broadly. It seemed to me when I was living in Hong Kong that Guangdong was often cited as the largest problem. You can do what you can in Hong Kong, but if Guangdong doesn't cooperate. In general, you seem to be quite satisfied with the level of cooperation now, but are there problems which you think might hinder this cooperation or hinder the success of your cooperation in the future with Guangdong?
I think if we see Guangdong being the baggage, one can easily point fingers saying that was none of my business. I think if we see sort of a pollution and development two sides of the same coin, or seeing Hong Kong and Guangdong two sides of the same coin, I think it addresses a lot of questions. There are, of course, a lot of problems. Having 160 firms joining is tip of the iceberg. So you can say that there remain thousands of factories that remain untouched. But I think what I observed in the last 2 years since I have taken up this job, I see a change of attitude. I see new policy impetus coming from the top. I see sort of a Hong Kong initiated ideas being taken on board. And I see money, resources, expertise actually crossing the boundary. So that fueled my optimism. But having said that, I'm not saying the problem is fully resolved now. It's just the beginning. But nothing better than having a new perspective where we are not there just to respond to problems, but to build a future. Now, in the mainland, there's a new concept called 科学发展观. I don't know how to translate it. Scientific development. But actually, it doesn't translate the meaning. But in actual terms, it means the common concept of sustainability. Now, every official now sort of start to learn about this concept. But actually, that is the same concept that in our current term of government, we talk about progressive development in the sense that, well, economic development must go hand in hand with environmental improvement. To me or to this government, I believe the same for the mainland government. Environmental problems today are created by things happened yesterday. But if we only sort of tackle problems yesterday, there will be no future. So we have to sort of do things in anticipation of problem and also look at sustainability. I think that's the paradigm shift that, well, the fact that we're able to spend Hong Kong taxpayers' money across the boundary to tackle problems that we are common represents a change in attitude on our side. As a result, mainland Guangdong municipal government also spending no less amount of money along the same line. The reason we put green PRD is we need to have a common goal and common ground to guide us. Now, there are still a lot of loose ends to be tied, but at least what's in common is both leaders talk about green PRD instead of just sort of talking about, well, should we set yet another higher target for a particular pollutants? I don't expect my chief executive to talk to Wang Yang on the minute air quality standard. That's a job for my profession in my department. But I think for leaders, for people who care about the environment to talk about sustainability, I think that's the momentum ahead.
Okay. At the end of the table, you do.
Hi, my name is Joshua Wu. I'm at the U.S. Department of Commerce. I know the discussion today is mostly about China, but I'm curious what your thoughts and perhaps recommendations are for the future of sustainable development in the U.S., given that you've lived here and have experience here in the West. What are some suggestions from Hong Kong's experience that would be adaptable to a Western model?
We can 学习香港.
No. I'm in fact start off and still focusing on Hong Kong. I should not be too ambitious to say that, well, Hong Kong can change the mainland. It's quite the country that, well, we live in a system whereby it's rather difficult to separate the two as economic ties strengthen, as integration sort of reinforced. Likewise, when we say about a highly globalized world, I think the environmental issue is the perfect example of that. Currently, I think the common problem that we are facing, as illustrated by the figure, the carbon footprint figure, I think it is so evident. While we can take a little bit of pride by saying 6.7, which sort of seem to have surpassed US, but we are nowhere near a more sort of ideal target. And the only way to have the carbon footprint reduced to a more sort of a comfortable zone rests with international cooperation. And in this regard, I think obviously people would look to the US for leadership, for technology, for commitment, and for a platform where different economy at different stage of development would be able to sit down together. I spend more time on trade and environment in my career. I've witnessed WTO process which are often sort of time-consuming, things drag on. But unlike trade, well, allow me to draw the comparison. In WTO negotiation, what's the price of not having an agreement in year one? It might be a zero-sum game. Some people gain a bit, some people lose a bit. But in the multilateral discussion on environment, if time drags on, everybody would be a loser. And that's why I'm anxious to say, well, even tiny Hong Kong, if we are managing something that we can do better in our own city, in our neighborhood, we are building on the hope that, well, this would provide the momentum for the whole nation to do better and to facilitate a better multilateral sort of discussion.
I'm going to take a different spin on kind of his topic. I mean, one thing I'm curious about, I think it's great that this is really exciting that the National Development Reform Commission has recognized this, because before, I think early on in the cooperation, it was a bit dodgy, right? You know, Hong Kong, Guangdong, you know, what does this really mean? And now that's been kind of approved. Now, I'm in China, you may know that like Jiangsu province is working with California on demand-side management, and I think I'm hearing inklings that maybe California will work with Guangdong on maybe climate issues. Now, have you? Is there any talk? Maybe is there any talk or some plans or some goals that? Because I think, in my mind, I think, the idea of Hong Kong, Guangdong partnering with California, that kind of this, because ultimately for global climate change reduction, we have to get things down to the lower level, and I think that the state to province kind of partnerships. Is there any plans for this, or is that too big a hunk to bite off right now?
Typical, the Hong Kong-Guangdong relationship is one classic example that cross-boundary cooperation can work closer. And we are now engaging Macau, which is another special administrative region in our neighborhood. We are actually also helping, sort of joining hands with other cities. For instance, last time I visited Beijing, their air monitoring system installed for Beijing City. I got some credit because they're telling me that my professional people actually sort of involved in that system. So there are these kind of professional and technical cooperation. Obviously, inter-region, sort of inter-country cooperation, the more the merrier. But in the case of Hong Kong, we sometimes people easily forget that you do not need a piece of agreement like an MOU to allow Californian company or Californian government to work with Hong Kong, because Hong Kong basically as a free port. As I mentioned, the door we open for CDM is there for you to grasp as an opportunity. So actually, I mentioned about technology transfer, resources transfer, expertise transfer. Those are possible given the current state of play, using Hong Kong as a market entry, using Hong Kong as a springboard into the mainland. And I believe that, mainland government would also be very ambitious in sort of presenting their case, particularly the internal aspiration for cleaner air, better environment is as immense as in any other cities, particularly in areas that might affect public health, that might affect the economy. So I'm not coming here to sign more papers, but I think some of the examples I presented actually opens up opportunity, including the cleaner production that you mentioned. While we have engaged one corporation called the Hong Kong Productivity Council to be the technical advisor, they actually partner and sometimes identify other service company to join hands. So that's another avenue.
Some other questions out here. Lyndon, pass it across the table to Valerie.
Thank you.
Where is the microphone? Oh, there it is. All right. And then when you're done, you reach on over and stretch it to her. Okay, good.
No problem. Hi, Andrew Griffin. I'm with the Department of State. I'm actually headed to the U.S. Consulate in Guangzhou to work on energy, environment, health issues. So I found your presentation especially interesting. I was wondering, you just mentioned public health. Could you talk a little bit more about efforts on the one hand to improve environmental protection, and on the other, broader efforts to improve public health? What evidence have you seen that public health indicators have improved as a result of some of these efforts? And maybe if you could talk about some of the goals that you've set regarding public health.
I do not spend too much time on the sort of public health area. But one thing, a very fundamental rationale behind our effort to upgrade the air quality objective is on protection of public health. There are a number of ways to present this. In certain, for instance, there are some debate back in Hong Kong saying that we're comparing the way we rewrite our sort of policy objective for the air quality objectives. They say, well, some countries say it's very explicitly say to protect public health. We're saying in protecting public interest, the best use of air quality, whatever. But the effort to upgrade and particularly to benchmark our air quality to the highest possible level, to an internationally recognized standard, suggested by World Health Organization, I think speak for itself. I think equally in the mainland, the drive is also coming from public health in two senses. One is direct health problems encountering the community, and also the rising medical bill. So I think it's so obvious, but I don't have sort of figures or things in hand to demonstrate that. But it is something goes without saying, and in particular in the case of Hong Kong, actually we have put in a very bold statement in last year's policy address. The chief secretary actually mentioned this in his policy address, that in our air quality objective review, we'll try to sort of give due regard to WHO standard. That was a statement made before we complete our study as a clear demonstration that, well, that's the way we're going about it.
I'll interject that actually, if you're not familiar with the Civic Exchange in Hong Kong, they've actually done some reports that look specifically at environmental health, because Rockefeller Brothers Fund, which is one of my supporters, they've been supporting environmental health work in southern China, so in Hong Kong and Guangdong in particular. So you can email us. There are some great papers. You know, they work together with the Hong Kong government on these. Yes.
My name is Valerie Nelson. I'm Coalition for Alternative Wastewater Treatment, and I wanted to follow up on the water quality question. Very impressed to hear of the desire to pilot new technologies in Hong Kong. In the water management field, I think it's coming to that the leading edge is really in reuse, water efficiency, recovery of energy from the wastewater, how to use water to really make a healthier, more beautiful city, rainfall harvesting. A lot of work in London, Singapore, Seoul, Seattle, and Portland. And I wondered if these new technologies right out on the edge, which your list in water seem to be the same big sewer treatment plants and sludge management. That's like the prior generation as far as science and engineering is going. So are these new water technologies at all on the list of what Hong Kong is interested in doing?
Yeah, very good question. In fact, that's an area that, compared with what we are doing on air, is less obvious, in the sense that in terms of drinking water supply, we are sometimes a bit spoiled, because half the water we keep in our reservoir and half come from Guangdong under certain arrangement. But as we all know about Hong Kong, in fact, the harbor and the streams in the more natural part of the territory are vital to the whole ecology. Now, in a very highly densely populated area, two sides of the harbor, we must have the best system to capture urban sewage. Perhaps two things we managed to have some success so far. It doesn't mean that it's the ultimate solution. One is a catchment of sewage system being put in place. So it's by and large there. We are sort of spending money to extend that system, basically to cover almost the entire urban territory, and then to sort of gradually upgrade the treatment. We are moving towards sort of what we call the stage 2 chemical plus sort of chlorination, decontamination. As we move along, we need to further move up to stage 3. Now, that's the infrastructure that we are putting in place. Together, as a result of the treatment, they produce sludge, and that's why you see the sludge treatment there as a complete life cycle. The other thing that we managed to succeed is we're able to introduce the polluters pay principle in sewage treatment. Basically, we're now 70% cost recovery. Now, which is which has not been an easy task, because that might have been one of the earlier schemes where we're able to recruit money from the community for water treatment, and also sending out a signal that, well, you need to conserve. But what we might not have done enough is to take that further, talking about total water cycle, water quality management. We are starting a water quality review by my professional department, but honestly, I have yet to sort of take a closer look before the profession has done the basic purposes. But looking at the region, I must say that the Guangdong side is more conscious, because in general, the whole region or whole nation has been in shortage of clean water or water supply. On our side, I think one possible area that we can do more is, in fact, look at the water quality from the ecological point of view. Now, we actually managed to keep a lot of stream much cleaner as part of the nature conservation. The destination of Greenland into the country park covers, among other things, protection of streams, protection of natural life there. And had it not been the case, we wouldn't have maintained such a biodiversity. So there are ongoing efforts, although on a very localized basis. But the reason that we are able to expand instead of contracting the size and the quality of a country park, in fact, also offer another level of protection.
Okay, we just got a couple minutes. Got real quick. Okay, how about two quick ones? Have Janice and then Helen. Super quick.
Hi, I'm Janice Engelhardt. I'll be quick. You mentioned two success stories in Guangdong Province: the print shop and the paper plant. And I'm wondering if there's any that the paper plant reduced its
part of the cleaner
use or
production.
whatever. So I'm just wondering if there's any mechanism in place for those leaders to share with other industrial affiliates their successes.
Yes. The scheme works in the sense that we start off with a pilot project involving 15 factories back in 2007. Because before we seek big amount of money from our legislature, we want to demonstrate. So 15 factories were involved. And the printing factory I mentioned was one of those. And those are cases that need to show around in order to demonstrate that the scheme works, and therefore we were able to get the larger amount of money to finance this project. But you're right that, as part of the condition for that subsidy, factories who join the scheme, having had the audit and the improvement, has an obligation, I would say more than an obligation, to open up that part of technology for their counterparts in the same industry. We identify 8 industries, which are largely the processing industry, which Hong Kong investors are more often involved, and then sort of try to sort of apportion the money among them. And exactly, because, we know that we can't be able to subsidize every single factory. There are over 50,000 factories somehow directly, indirectly invested by Hong Kong. There's a limitation of resources. So we start off this scheme focusing certain money on auditing so that people would realize that, by doing something, you can make a big change. Once they embarked on the improvement, if it's partly subsidized by government, they have an obligation to showcase to others in order to spread the message and to duplicate the proven technology. Yes, so we're exactly going on the way you suggest.
I'm actually hoping, because I met with the Hong Kong Productivity Council, and I'm hoping actually in my publication next year to have a little commentary box that because I want more details. I mean, this is great. It's great to get further examples, but also that they've been working with some NGOs, and I'm want to get this down on paper. Okay, Helen, you're going to close this out here.
I'm Helen Erkel.
Make it good.
Resources for the Future. Instead of landfill, which itself gradually generates methane, which is 4 times worse for global warming than carbon dioxide. Have you considered using municipal waste to produce electricity? That's my first question. My second question, which is short, since you're talking in terms of decades, looking ahead, no matter what you do, no matter what China and the United States do, there's going to be gradual sea rise from the global the gases in the air. And since Hong Kong has so much of its land roughly at current sea level, not far above it, are you taking precautions for adapting to gradual over several
And your answer will be the
decades
foundation
rise?
for another meeting I have to do.
I hope we can do precaution, but obviously, given things happening now, I think we need more than precaution, and that's why we need to focus on area which can make big difference. And in the case of Hong Kong, in terms of mathematics, the best way to reduce our carbon footprint is to tackle the energy sector, which has the biggest footprint. And the best way to tackle energy is to shift to cleaner fuel that I've mentioned, and also to conserve the use of energy, which is where the money goes to the building energy efficiency. At the same time, we're also drawing up plans as all government under the sort of UN arrangement on climate change. So I hope we would all focus more on the longer term, tangible reduction in carbon footprint while we drop contingency plan, which is a sort of doomsday sort of arrangement. But you're also right that, well, in addition to energy and transportation, landfill do impose a carbon footprint. There are 3 big landfills in Hong Kong, big compared with our small size of the territory. We are not only considering to use that. We are among the 3 landfills, one of which is methane piped up to produce town gas for the territory. There is a 17-kilometer pipeline now connecting with one of the landfills to the town gas production plant. I might be divulging some commercial secret of Hong Kong and China Gas. They are talking with us to do the same for the remaining 2 landfills. If that's successful and subject to negotiation, that might make 15% of Hong Kong's town gas produced by landfill gas, which is a form of renewable gas and which is quite substantial in any city. We're talking about sort of that percentage of town gas we use in our kitchen, in our heater, from landfill. So that's why I mentioned that, well, the way we manage our landfill are in fact not bad. Yeah. But counting totally on landfill, unfortunately, is not sustainable. So that's why we're doing it.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah.
I actually I was one part of my trip in Hong Kong, I actually got to go tromp around one of those landfills, and it was very modern. Yeah, and also we are now thinking of using restored landfill. In Hong Kong, one of the favorite spots I take reporters to do interviews. I often prefer to have TV interviews outdoor instead of indoor. One of the fields we picked is a baseball field, which is on top of a restored landfill. That's the first generation restored landfill. Now we are talking about restored landfill in the size of 60 or 70 hectares. So there are some active thinking how to turn that into better use. We have landfills used for recreational purpose, golf, driving range, parks, but we are thinking sort of on a more long-term basis how to make best use of them. But at least during idling period, they usually are being kept green, and also provide a very lovely sort of green background in a very congested neighborhood. But yes, that might become a new possible opportunity for us to make the city greener, but at least to turn those into better use. Thank you. Well, first of all, let's thank him again. And I hope that you all agree that it is worth paying attention to Hong Kong, particularly the folks going to the, our U.S. consulate in Guangdong. But yeah, so again, I want to thank you very much for coming, and it's exciting again to see a real shift for much more leadership starting, in Hong Kong now on the issue. And hope you stick around heading this Environment Protection Bureau for a while. Thank you again very much. And those of you that are in the China Environment Forum Network, do note we're having on May 12th, we're having a meeting on on. Air pollution, health, and climate change. It's called Seen Through the Smog. And on the 20th on wildlife trading issues. In fact, at that meeting they will probably be talking about Hong Kong because a lot of illegal wildlife snuck through your part, but less and less now. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.